Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ladies and gentlemen, District Governor, I'm glad to be here with you today to join in the Rotary District 2452 8th Conference in the Kingdom of Bahrain. And it's my pleasure to join you today to talk more about the economy and the community development. Under my portfolio, the ministry manages three sectors: commerce, industry, and tourism. And within each sector, we started our vision in the ministry, which is part of the 2030 vision of the Kingdom of Bahrain, to develop each sector in an integral way with the community that works in the center. Of course, each sector has its own challenges, its own objectives, but the underlying factor there amongst all three is that we strive for more job creation and more prosperity for the people and the residents of Bahrain. This, of course, falls in line with Vision 2030, launched by His Majesty in 2008. And it is a vision that has clearly mentioned what Bahrain aims to do since 2008 leading up to 2030. And it has been the map for all development carried out in Bahrain since then. So when we started looking at commerce, industry, and tourism, we started dissecting each sector to see how we can complement the vision of 2030. And of course, I have to mention all this in a context of prior to COVID-19. COVID-19, of course, has put a new dimension into our planning, execution, and I will touch upon that a bit later in my introduction. But prior to COVID-19, when we look at each sector, we started looking at them in a deep dive, and I'll kind of speak about each one of them individually. If we start with industry, we worked with our colleagues at the EDB to define what kind of industry we want in Bahrain and what kind of industry we can afford to have in Bahrain. We're a country that doesn't enjoy huge land space or abundant natural resources. So we had to be quite selective in what kind of industry we wanted to have in Bahrain and what was the objective of industry. Of course, one main objective was to diversify our economy, and I think we have done that, not just recently, but since the inception of ALBA in the mid-60s, and we were one of the leaders in the region to divest or to diversify from the oil and energy sector. Starting ALBA in the 1960s has led to a thriving downstream industry in aluminum in Bahrain today, and it is considered one of the largest employers in not only in the industrial sector but throughout Bahrain, and we believe that there is 12,000 jobs directly impacted through the aluminum sector in Bahrain. So we started looking at industry that was clean, energy efficient, creates jobs, and contributes to export value. Because one of the things we wanted to use industry for was also to expand the exports of Bahrain to the world. And that led us, at the end of the day, to focus on certain sectors like pharmaceuticals, food industry, and jointly with the EDB, we started developing and promoting these sectors. We also considered logistics there, and we considered logistics as an industry more than logistics on its own merit, because it is complementary to industry, and Bahrain enjoys good fundamentals for that through land, sea, and air connectivity. When we looked at commerce, commerce was a completely different initiative. There, Bahrain has been a commercial hub for many years. We looked at ways of not how to introduce commerce, but how to make it easier to do business in Bahrain. And we did so with one approach to make it easier for people already established in Bahrain and Bahrainis or residents of Bahrain, plus how to attract people from abroad. The idea was always to make Bahrain an international hub, to make it attractive for people to come from abroad and set up and invest in Bahrain, because we believe once they are here, they will create opportunity, they will create jobs, and they will expand our economy. So we started, again, our deep dive. First, we started with our ministry, and we looked internally. What were the things we could do to make it easier to set up a business in Bahrain, to make it easier to transact. And we went through a full reform starting in 2015, looking at all our laws, legislations, practices, internal, whether they were internal or whether they were governed by law. And we went through a major overhaul. We complemented that by introducing Sijillat, our online registration portal. So we complemented moving the legislative part with the technology, and we moved today to 100% paperless operation. You can register your company, you can do it on the internet 24/7 from anywhere in the world. And we accompanied that as well by relaxation of our commercial laws, opening up activities to non-Bahrainis, and today we are one of the most liberal in the region. When we look at tourism, tourism was a completely different ballgame, because at the beginning it was not a sector that was contributing much to our economy. It was not a sector that was focused on, and the government decided in 2015 to give it more emphasis and importance in the diversification of our economy. And hence, people ask, what has tourism got to do with commerce and industry being in one ministry? The approach was to treat tourism as a sector, as an industry. So this is why we added it, or the government chose to add it to the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. We started with a tourism strategy, which was not there before. We launched it in 2015, and we had a clear aim to emphasize more on tourism, again, because it promotes Bahrain, it creates job opportunity, brings in investment. So it ticks a lot of the boxes we wanted to do, which complement economy with community development. We were successful up to COVID in doubling the tourism contribution to the GDP. We started with about 3.6%, and we ended 2019 at about 7% of the GDP. Of course, we don't stop there. We aim to be in a double digit of our GDP, and keep in mind, throughout these years, the GDP has been increasing. So our contribution, as well as our absolute value of GDP, has gone up throughout these years. Then COVID arrived, and that was a big mess for everybody. It took us all by surprise, took the whole world by surprise. So we had to change our thinking. We have to change our mindset, and we had to think of how to preserve what we have for a short period, how to stabilize the ship. The challenge in the beginning was not knowing, and still is, when is the end of this pandemic, or how long it's going to take, or how long it's going to cost to sail through. So we had to be very prudent and very quick in our decision making, especially in the beginning. And that's where we chose to, first of all, look at the health issues, stabilize that. We started very early, and I think that's been a blessing through the leadership of His Highness, the Crown Prince, the Prime Minister. We started in January of 2020, and we had a full team working under his leadership and his command, with regular meetings twice a week, and those formal meetings started 3 weeks before the first case was even identified in Bahrain. I think that early start gave us the opportunity to think calmly, not to react, to be proactive, and it gave us time to set up a good medical team with adequately funded and equipped in terms of equipment, medication, staff, that we started our economic recovery towards the end of March last year, very early in the pandemic. That has given us a chance to strike a balance between health and economy, and slowly transition into supporting the economy once the health issues were settled. This, of course, I won't go into much detail into it, but we established a big stimulus package at the very beginning of the pandemic, about 33% of our, equivalent to 33% of our GDP. And again, the underlying factor there was to minimize job loss. We didn't want to make this problem from a health to an economical to a social issue. So we managed to do that. We stabilized the market. We managed to reduce as much as possible job loss. And thankfully, Q1 of 2021 has shown a growth compared to 2020 Q1, keeping in mind that a month and a half at least of 2020 were kind of normal business circumstances. So that's a very good sign for us. And we seem to be on the road to recovery economically. One last thing I want to touch upon. It is the emphasis Bahrain has given lately to the SME sector. We believe, and this has a lot of community ties, that the SMEs are the future of Bahrain. This is why His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has set up the SME Development Board in 2018. And we were entrusted, and he has honored me to chair that board, to develop a 5-year national strategy to develop SMEs. Prior to that, there was no direct focus or concentration on the SME sector, and a lot of them were being frustrated and felt neglected. Since then, we launched the policy, the strategy. We have 3 main KPIs and 22 initiatives to support achieving these KPIs. And I have to say that despite COVID coming halfway in the strategy, but we are so far 70% achieved of what we set out to achieve. And we are experiencing growth in the SME sector and a clear path for people starting companies in this sector to develop their businesses further. We feel that is the future. We have a predominantly young population in Bahrain. It's where we see jobs being created, where we see mindsets of citizens and residents of Bahrain changing from job seekers to job providers, and where we see the future in developing and diversifying our economy. I'd like to stop here. Again, I'm very honored and to be here with you today. I will leave as much time as we can of the session for interaction with the audience. And thank you for considering to have your conference in Bahrain. We wish you a pleasant stay here. Thank you.